Push P. Yeah, push P. Turn me up. Turn me up, P. Corners in the paddock, get my piece. Push P. Cop new hammers for my piece. We don't want no.
Hello, wonderful people of YouTube. This is Cree Cree. Thank you so much for clicking on my video. As always, I truly appreciate you. So, this go round, I decided to do something a little different. I wanted to do a series of videos showcasing women, namely that's in the entertainment industry that we have grown to love and admire on stage and on TV, but then behind the scenes they got a little bit of stuff going on. And I decided I wanted to call it the Messy Auntie series. You know, like I said, these is women that we grew up with, grew up listening to, looking at on TV, loving them, admiring them, respecting them. But once they get off stage, they gets a little messy. And I know how much we all love mess, right? But I ain't gonna be messy about it though. I want to do it in a respectable way, but we still gonna get into some of that mess. And I kind of got this idea when my sister came to me a few months ago, and when I first started doing these videos, she suggested that I do a video on this first lady that we're going to talk about today. And that's what made me say, you know what, hey, let's do a series about all the women in the industry that you know got some stuff going on. So the Messy Auntie that's going to kick off this series is none other than the cousin of Detroit herself, Miss Anita Baker. Give it up for her. Now we all know Miss Anita Baker, and if you listening to this and you don't know who Miss Anita Baker is, I guarantee you your parents do, or even your grandparents do. She's been a legend in these streets since the 80s. She was one of the ones to help usher in that quiet storm era that we've all grown up to know and love. So it's only fair to give her flowers, you know, while she's still here and everything. But also we want to get into her messiness too. So let's get on to it. Let's go on back. Take a journey back with me to 1958 to when Miss Anita Denise Baker was born. January 26, 1958. She was born in Toledo, Ohio, but was raised and grew up in Detroit, Michigan. Now, there are some interesting things about her childhood that I did not know. Her childhood was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. She was abandoned or given up for adoption by her biological mother. Depending on which story you want to believe, I've read that she was given up for adoption and given to an elderly couple, and then I've also read where she was literally left on someone's doorstep, on a random family's doorstep, and they kind of took her in. So it just kind of depends on which story of that you want to believe. She was raised by an elderly couple by the name of Granville and Mary Lewis. She actually grew up believing that Mr. and Mrs. Lewis were her grandparents. And it wasn't until they passed away when she was around 12 or 13, and they passed basically back to back, one right after the other. So they died seemingly within months of each other. And it wasn't until they both passed away is when she found out the truth that these were not her grandparents at all. In fact, they weren't even her family. She was not related to them. She was just their foster kid. She actually found all this information out from a family member by the name of Lois Landry. Anita actually grew up believing that Lois was her older sister when in fact she was her aunt. And so Lois and her husband Walter took her in, and they legally adopted her at around 12 or 13 years old after her foster parents died. Now, as most of you all may know, raising a teenager is definitely no picnic, and they had some trying moments with her in those teenage years. She was rebellious, and she was getting kicked out of schools, and running the streets, and doing stuff she ain't got no business doing. And from what I was reading, a lot of that had to do with the fact that she didn't have, even though she wasn't raised with her mother, she didn't have a relationship with her mother, but her mother did start coming back around this time when she was adopted by her aunt. And as with any kid, that does things to them, because you're coming in and out of their life. You my mama, and I can't see you every day, and why can't I see you every day, and why can't I come with you, and things like that. And that can, cause a lot of emotional distress in a child, especially when they really don't understand what's going on. So she went through some very trying times in those early teenage years, but when she was about 16, she started going to, she started frequenting the nightclubs, and, started getting into the music scene. And from there, discovered that, she had a voice, and she started singing with local bands in Detroit, and getting involved with music a little more. And I'm sure that was probably to take her mind off of, what was going on, at home and with her mama and stuff like that. So around 1975, 76, around 17, 18 years old, she was discovered by a gentleman by the name of David Washington, who was starting a band, who was part of a disco funk band by the name of Chapter 8. She eventually auditioned for the band, and the band loved her, and she became part of that band. So in 1976, she became a member of Chapter 8. They performed locally around the clubs for the next few years. In 1979, they signed with a record label by the name of, I hope I'm saying this right, Areola Records.
It's called the Areola. The Areola, yeah.
I hope that's not how you pronounce that, but okay. Yeah, that's gonna be real weird, telling somebody, yo, I got signed by Areola Records. You're gonna be like, what the hell? Okay. But anyway, well, soon after signing to Areola in 1979, they released their debut album titled Chapter 8, and they came out with the song I Just Want to Be Your Girl. Some of you may be familiar with the famous riff in the song, because Bone Thugs and Harmony sampled that riff years later in their song, It's the First of the Month. So if you know that song, then I Just Want to Be Your Girl will be very familiar to you. And so that was a very modest hit back in the day. But unfortunately, not long after the release of their debut album, unfortunate circumstances arose where Areola was then bought out by Arista Records, which at the time was headed by Clive Davis. Once Arista took over, they took a look at the roster, looked at Chapter 8, decided that they no longer wanted to pursue a partnership with them, and so they let them go, mainly citing the reason that they did not like Anita Baker's voice. They didn't think that her voice was star quality, and didn't think that she'd be able to sell any records, and so ultimately they dropped them from the label. This, of course, discouraged Miss Anita, and she went back to Detroit, decided not to really do anything with music anymore. She was waitressing for a while, and then she was working at a law office in Detroit, doing administrative work, secretarial work, things like that. So that was gonna be her life for the most part. In 1982, she was approached by a former associate of Areola Records named Otis Smith, who came to her and said, hey, you should do a solo record. Don't worry about being with another band or anything like that. You should just branch it out and go solo. And so he convinced her to sign to a label that he started up by the name of Beverly Glen Records in LA. So she signed to Beverly Glen in 1983. And from that label, her debut album, The Songstress, came out in 1983. Her first single, No More Tears, was a fairly modest hit, but it wasn't until her second single, which was Angel, that put people on notice for the most part. No More Tears reached number 49 on the R&B Billboard charts, and Angel reached all the way up to number 5. After Angel came You're the Best Thing Yet, and final single, Feel the Need. Everything was going good, but then, of course, there are some issues with the label. You know, they pussyfooting around on getting her second album out because she like, hey, let's strike while the iron is hot. Y'all ain't doing nothing. What's going on? I'm trying to get an album. I'm not sure what's going on with them, but they taking their time. So she started looking for other labels to go to that would be able to help her and get her off the ground even more than, what she already was. Of course, that caused an issue with the label, and then they sued her for breach of contract in 1985, which ultimately, in the end, she won that case, and she was released from the label, and she was able to go elsewhere. From there, she signed with Elektra Records and was able to release her sophomore album, which was called Rapture. And if you know, Rapture pretty much took off. Because you got caught up in the rapture, no one in the world, same old love. I think Good Love was on that album too. I want to know what good love feels like. I think that was on that album too. That's one of my favorites by her, by the way. With the second album, Rapture, came great success. She was able to book her first tour, which was the Night of the Rapture tour in 1986 and 1987. In 87, she won her first 2 Grammys for Rapture for Best R&B Female Vocal Performance and Best R&B Song for Sweet Love. Also in that same year is when she did the song with the Winans, Ain't No Need to Worry, and that just catapulted her to a whole different level with the R&B, jazz, and even the gospel fans. So yeah, after Rapture, she took off. In 1988, she came out with her third album, Giving You the Best That I Got. And now that I'm thinking about it, that is the album that Good Love was on. It was not Rapture, it was this album. Giving You the Best That I Got was another huge successful album, and that actually made it to the number 1 spot, beating out his previous album, Rapture. On that album, we had the title track, Giving You the Best That I Got, Just Because, Lead Me Into Love, and like I said, this was the one that had Good Love in it. Like I said, that's my jam. That's my cut right there. In 1990, she came out with her 4th album, Compositions, which was a good album, but it was not as successful as the previous 2, Giving You the Best That I Got and Rapture. So let's get into her love life here for a little bit. So back in 1986, when the second album, Rapture, was real hot, that's when she met the man who would eventually become her husband, Walter Bridgeforth Jr. Interesting stuff about this relationship is that when they first started talking, when they first started kicking it or whatever, she was the side chick because Mr. Bridgeforth was married. He was married to somebody else, and she knew. But you know how it is. You know how it is when you get with another woman's husband. First, you act like you don't care. Oh, well, it's just this and that. Then, somebody gonna start catching feelings. Somebody gonna get on their feelings and be like, oh, well, you know what? Either it's gonna be her or me and all that. But interestingly enough, she didn't do all that. Once she was feeling that, you know what, I'm in love with him and I can't keep doing this back and forth, he with her and then he with me. No, she just straight up, she was like, hey, you know what, I love you, I know you love me, but this ain't what I want to do. I want to be with you, but I understand, you have her. And so I'm just gonna step back and just let you do you, and we'll just leave it at that. And apparently that lit a fire up under his ass, because not too long after that, he called her up and was like, me and old girl done. We done. I want to be with you. I want to be with you, boo. It's me and you. Come on, let's do this. So after dating off and on for a couple of years, they got married in 1988. After unfortunately having 2 miscarriages in the beginning of their marriage, they did welcome 2 sons, one in 1992 and one in 1994. The first son, Walter, was born in 1993, and then their second son, Edward, was born in 1994. Soon after she had Edward in 94, she came out with her next album, which was Rhythm of Love. And that was a highly successful, highly awaited album, because that was her first album in 5 years, or almost 5 years, because the last album came out in 1990, Compositions. And of course, that album garnered the hits Body and Soul, I Apologize, and It's Been You All the Time. Now, after Rhythm of Love, we did not hear from her for a while. For a good 10 years. We sitting up here like, okay, Auntie Miss Anita, what the hell going on? But apparently what happened is she left Elektra in 95 because she was not happy with how they promoted Rhythm of Love, and she wanted to go somewhere better. So then she signed with Atlantic Records in 1996. But then when she signed, she didn't even start recording right away. She went on another hiatus because she wanted to be there for her family. As you can see, family was more important to her than, going on tours and things like that, because she worked so much during the 80s and before she had kids that, by the time she had the kids, that's where she wanted to devote her time to. So she didn't start recording with Atlantic. She didn't start getting back into the studio and recording with Atlantic until 2000. But then everything that she recorded around that time had to be scrapped because the machine, the systems that she was doing the recording on had some kind of malfunction, and none of her recordings was coming out right. So they had to be scrapped. That, of course, resulted in her filing a lawsuit against them in 2001. And then soon after, she was dropped from the label without releasing anything. So you was at that label from 96 to 01 and did not drop one lick of a song. How sad is that? She didn't sign with another record label until 2004 when she signed with Blue Note Records, and then that's when she released her next album, My Everything, in 2004, which had the songs My Everything and another one of my favorites by her, How Does It Feel? That record shot up to #1 on the R&B charts, and rightfully so. I mean, this was her first album in 10 years, and people had been waiting on her. In 2005, a year and a half or so later, she released her Christmas album, which was Christmas Fantasy. I think that went #1, got her a Grammy, and she has had no album since then. Now, I remember there was a tease of a new album coming out back in 2012 when she redid the song Lately, the song that was made famous by Tyrese in 1999. We thought that we was going to have another album then, but there has been nothing since then. And at this point, I can't say whether or not she got something in the works. We don't know. But right now, as it stands, the Christmas album was the last album that she brought out. All right, family, this concludes part 1 of the Auntie Miss Anita series. Stay tuned for part 2, and I will have that to you very, very soon. Otherwise, leave a comment, like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you in part 2. Thank you so much. My name is Cree Cree. Y'all be easy.